If you're wanting to build a Gantt chart using software, I would recommend using some of the specific project management software rather than trying to do something like this in Excel. The one that I recommend is a software called Gantt Project, which you can see on screen at the minute. The reason I recommend it is that it's free and it also is available in PC and Mac distributions, which I know will make a difference to many of you. In terms of just quickly demonstrating what the software can do for you, I'm not going to go into detail, but we'll just do a very brief demonstration. The first thing we can do within the software is build a work breakdown structure. Now, the way we'd build a work breakdown structure is we'd put our tasks into the software, and then we create the breakdown structure by indenting tasks. So if we just do a few of those, if we indent some tasks there, we end up with effectively a high-level work breakdown structure where we've got task 0 and task 5. So we'll call that, say, experimental design as that task, and then we'd have this task which could be data collection. And by doing that, then we've got the experimental design as one high-level task and data collection as another task. If we then look at putting in durations, we've talked about this in the previous videos in the module round about how we estimate durations, but if I put some timelines in for tasks, so if we're talking about experimental design, this task might be initial design, obtain equipment, building the equipment, and then finally initial piloting. So we assume that the design is going to take us maybe a week to do, so that'd be 5 days. Obtaining the equipment might take us 2 weeks to do. Building the equipment might take us 5 days to do, and then we'll do an initial pilot which might take 3 days to do. Let's just use that as an example. If we then, so if you double click on the task, it brings you into a more full dialog box. So we've got 3 days. So then we can start to build our timeline. So initial design we're going to do before we start obtaining our equipment, potentially. Once we've obtained our equipment, we would then build our equipment, and then if we do our initial piloting after that, it gives us an opportunity to build a really quick time frame. Now, which is not fantastic in terms of project management, but it does allow me to show you how the software works. If we come in here, one of the great things about using project management software for doing this rather than something like Excel is that if we decide to change the time frame on a task, it's really quick and easy for that time frame to move out or be shortened, and this whole plan would update. If we then link the task of data collection to our experimental design task, then we can obviously move out this phase really easily into the future. The second thing we can do in terms of the software is we can start to allocate resources into the tasks. So if we go into our resource sheet here, we can add in a resource. So this might be a technician, for example. We might have a resource of a postdoc who might be working on the project. And then if we come back into our Gantt chart over here, we can then start to go, well, actually the design work is going to be predominantly done by the postdoc. We'll include in here the technician inputting into that a little bit, so 20% of their time on that. We can then put in that the technician is going to take the lead on finding the equipment, with the postdoc contributing to that process as well. The building of the equipment, we'll let the technician do that, just to illustrate how the software works, and then the initial piloting, we'll have the postdoc working on that full time. So if we now go back into our resource sheet, what we can see is an indication of what tasks any individual would be working on at any given point in time. You can see that for the postdoc here, in this space here, there's a time frame when they're not actually busy, and you can see in these areas where there's 20%, the green is indicating an underutilization of the person during that time frame. So that's an initial view of what the software can do. A couple of other things that enables you to do. We talked earlier, we talked about the idea of a critical path, and one of the reasons we want to do a scheduling process is to look at critical paths. The software enables us to see what the critical path through the project alongside the tasks that define the timeline. So in this case, the timeline is defined by these tasks. To add another task in though, and I'm going to put a task in of obtain samples. Okay, and we're going to make obtaining samples take us 25 days in duration. If I then thought about, well, I need to do my initial design before I do my sample, I'm going to connect this task to this task, and then if I zoom out a little bit, I then need to have my samples in place before I can do my initial piloting. So I'm going to connect this task to this task here. And what that's going to do, if I turn the critical path off and then turn it back on again, is it changes my critical path through the task. So actually the most important tasks to complete would be, first of all, initial design, then obtaining the samples, and then doing the experiments. And there's what's called float or slack on the building equipment phase. So if we go in here and I now make this 8 days long, for example, you'll see that that has no impact on the overall timescale of the project, whereas if I was to change the time frame for obtaining samples to 30 days, it pushes the project out even further. So the critical path is defines how long the overall project takes to do. That's the second thing the software will do. The final thing that the software will do, which isn't so important for the planning phase but can be very useful during the delivery phase of the project, is creating what's called a project baseline. So I'm going to create what's called an initial plan project baseline. You can call it whatever you like, and if I create that and then I turn that baseline on, so I've got the initial plan and I've turned it on. If I now start modifying how long a task takes to do, we will see the changes that occur. And in here, I've just extended the time frame for obtaining the equipment, and you can see that the plan is in red and the new plan is in blue, and it indicates the delays that we're having by being coloured red. If I was to bring the sample time frame down to 25 days, you'd see the impact in green of delivering early. It's a really good tool for exploring how long tasks might take and how long delays in the project and how they might impact on other activities against the initial plan. So baselining, identifying your critical path, really useful tools from the software. Building individual resourced Gantt charts I think can be hugely powerful, especially on much more collaborative projects, especially on projects where you have external partners, and being structured in the way that you do this so that if you need to have a timeline like this, especially for projects where the research methodology is quite determined and also where you may be using external equipment and facilities, really important to put together this type of technical plan for delivery of your research.